Here we go. Welcome. My name is Andrew Aitchison, and I am the admission advisor and strategic recruiter at Emmanuel College. And part of my new portfolio is managing the Center for Religion and its Context. So this is my first Zoom event that we're hosting with the center, and we're very excited to be celebrating this wonderful publication and our friend and colleague Amy today. We'll begin by introducing our principal, Rankin Craig, to bring greetings.
Thank you, Andrew, for your new role in this. I'm very grateful for your leadership and greetings everyone. I'm greeting to you from Toronto and my own home, and was gonna plan in the campus, but due to the weather, we are here a little bit more cozy way, and I am super excited about this book launch. At Emmanuel, academic excellence is one of the top priorities, and sharing the research and publication and the scholarships of our faculty members and otherwise that will benefit the community wide. And the goal is to share the sort of good news, but then also cultivating that sense of community of learning together. So today is such an occasion, and I'm so delighted to highlight or lift up our wonderful scholar, Dr. Amy Panton, today. When I learned about Amy's doctor research and the dissertation, I was so intrigued. And I don't know whether you know her dissertation, which was done beautifully last year. And the title was like, God, where are you when I cut myself? It was a really poignant, rhetorical, but also deeply personal and political question that I think she delved into as a research question. And then part of, I think, the book today that she's gonna share and other wonderful people will review will be based on that. She has been appointed as assistant practical theology this past year, so it's kind of brand new role that she's engaging in, but she has been teaching some courses for Emmanuel College and for a few years. And one of such course that I am so grateful to know is on disability, neurodiversity, and mental health. And she's been tremendous help to help this course, our Master of Spiritual Studies capstones. That's pretty big class in terms of number, but also that's the kind of culminating the kind of fruit of our MPS students before they going into the world to serve and lead the world. And so I'm very grateful for her teaching capacity and willingness to serve our students and our teaching here as well. I'm also really amazed at her work. Not only that she's a great teacher and a great organizer, she's also an amazing pioneer in terms of starting a peer-reviewed journal. So she's been a founder of the journal called Med and Crip Theology since year 2021. I don't know how she had the time to do the PhD work and doing this as well. So we need to learn about her multitasking capacity here. And also founder of Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health, and Disability since 2020. And I believe that my sermon was published in there as an inaugural, and I was so honored to be asked and engage some podcasts together. So as you see that she's been already rising scholar and doing really, really important and crucial role in this arena of the practical theology, but more specifically on disability and Crip theology and whatnot. So I think you are all in for treat for celebrating and recognizing this book as a community. So I really am excited, and congratulations, Dr. Panton. for this accomplishment, and looking forward to learning more with you and from you. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Principal Haran Kim Craig. Those were lovely opening remarks, and it really is really a joyous occasion here on Dr. Panton's book launch. I'm just going to move into the land acknowledgement now, just to ground ourselves in the spaces where we are coming from. We gather today from many points across Turtle Island on the lands now known as Canada. I am currently in Oshawa, which is situated on lands within the traditional treaty territory of the Michi-Saagiik and Chippewa, Anishinabeg, and the signatories of the Williams Treaties, including the Mississaugas of the Scugog Island, Hiawatha, Curve Lake, Alderville First Nations, and the Chippewas of the Georginas Island, Rama and Bose La First Nations. We are grateful for the Anishinabeg who have cared for the land and waters within this territory since time immemorial. Wherever you may be at this moment, I invite you to acknowledge that where you are was once the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. I hope you'll join me during this gathering and beyond with awareness and gratitude for being able to work, grow, learn, play, and worship on this land, and work to continually strengthen our relationships among all living beings and with this land. Thank you. And with that, I'll move things over to Shauna.
Thanks, Jenny. Yay, I'm so glad to be here. This day is finally here. Congrats to Amy. So hi, everyone. For those that I haven't met before, my name is Shauna Kombosic. I'm the associate editor at Mad and Crip Theology Press, which published this wonderful book of Dr. Panton's. I'm so excited to be here with y'all and celebrate this beautiful new work that's out in the world, and its author, of course. Dr. Amy Panton founded Mad and Crip Theology Press in 2021, as Haran said. As a mad theologian and as someone who lives with multiple physical impairments, Amy felt that there was a lack of space where those with firsthand experiences of mental health and disability were publishing their thoughts. So what does one do when one sees a need? Well, not all of us, but Amy is a visionary. We do something about it, and the press was born. Since it was founded, Amy has fearlessly led and envisioned a better world than the one that exists now. She is determined in a way that leaves me breathless some days, and the vision she has to make the world a kinder and more inclusive place for all people is to be admired. Amy seems to take everything in stride, although I'm sure it doesn't always feel that way, Amy. It seems that way to us, using each roadblock or potential barrier as another reason to move forward rather than to sit back or to turn away. I deeply, deeply admire her vision and energy, as well as her humanness. And I'm so honored to be able to work alongside her in the press's mission, which is co-creating with mad and disabled folks and fostering a space where knowledge is shared within community, stories are heard, and life-giving dialogues flourish. In a world that often demands efficiency and praises doers, busyness, and a quick pace, we intentionally at the press embrace Crip time. There is no need to rush or push. At the press, we aim to build meaningful relationships, first with those in our community, and always to take care of our body minds as we journey together. Dr. Panton wears many hats, which is a nice way of saying she has many different jobs, as Haran has pointed to already. She's a renegade theologian, assistant professor of practical theology teaching stream at Emmanuel, and co-founder of the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health and Disability, which was launched in 2021 with her friend, the Reverend Dr. Miriam Spies, among many others. If that wasn't enough, Amy is also in school as a student, continuing her journey always of learning and contributing to the world in new ways. Now, Amy's book, which we are here to celebrate today, Soul Care for Self-Injury, is the bounded in pages embodiment of her vision for the press. Her vision for her dissertation, now turned into this beautiful book, started with a gap that she saw: the spiritual care of those who have experience with self-injury and spiritual resources to accompany this care. The book is generous and honest, and the research it offers is vital to spiritual leaders, faith communities, practitioners in the mental health field, and family members who wish to engage in trauma-informed ways with people in their lives who self-injure. Amy puts the stories of 16 memoirists at the forefront of her work and does not shy away from that which is difficult. Rather, she engages deeply, reflecting theologically and grounding her work in compassion, scriptural resources, and a heart to better care for those who are in pain. Here to chat with Amy today about her book is another absolutely wonderful human who has been involved in many ways with the press over the last year and a bit. One way of which is as one of the authors we have had the pleasure to work with. Dr. Iris J. Gildia published her book with us last year, entitled The Poetry of Belonging, which is a gorgeous contribution to conversations about trauma, earth-based spirituality, and embodied healing. Iris is Associate Professor of Book and Media Studies at St. Michael's College in the University of Toronto. She's also a community arts facilitator, an artist and poet, and an all-around stellar human. And her book is also available on the press website, small plug. And before I hand this over to Iris and Amy for conversation about this new amazing book, I did want to also say we're going to do a raffle for 2 ebooks. So for anyone who's interested in putting your name in the hat for that, just direct message me your email address, and then we'll let the 2 lucky folks know who won. So yeah, now over to both Iris and Amy for conversation about this gorgeous new book.
Thank you, Shauna. Hello, Amy.
Hello, Iris. It's so lovely to see you. And I'm so happy to see everyone else here today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and supporting this event.
I am so honored to get to be here and get to celebrate with you. Thank you for bringing this beautiful book into the world. I know when I first read it, I was just so moved by compassion, just compassion pouring off of the pages, coming from you. And so I just want to thank you before we get into chatting for bringing this book, and all of you and all of your 2 words that were describing you, pioneer and visionary. I have to attest to that. And so I am so grateful to be here celebrating with you. And we're going to chat about this beautiful book that you have brought into the world. And, so one of the first questions that I have for you, and Shauna kind of spoke to this a little bit in her introduction, but maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to write Soul Care for Self-Injury. Was there a particular moment that made you feel like this book just needed to exist?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And I've been sitting with it for the past couple of days. I actually started researching self-injury before I wrote this book, when I was doing my master's with Dr. Pam McCarroll, who's here as well. So Pam and I have been sort of digging into self-injury for a long time together. And it's been so wonderful to work alongside her and have her guidance and mentorship through these projects. Really what happened was, maybe like a decade ago, somebody came to me and told me that her daughter was cutting herself. And she was really stressed out and worried about what was going on in their family. And she knew I was studying theology. So she asked me, did I know of any good resources that she could read, or that maybe her daughter could read, that would help what was going on in their family? And I didn't at that time. So, and this is actually the opening vignette that's in the book. I went and I started looking, and there was some stuff which was really amazing to see. And so I was able to help get some of those resources to her. But I thought at the time, I think there could be more. I think we could build here on what exists. I'm so grateful to some of the earlier theologians who thought about this deeply and who created such a beautiful um, platform for this to be spoken about and foundation. And so from there, I did a master's at THM. And so this is what my master's project was about. And when I finished that, I thought, I think we could go deeper. And Pam also encouraged me to continue to do this work. So here we are today. I mean, it took me quite a long time to do this project. Many years of thinking and writing and rewriting, and I also during the process of writing it and sort of like trying to figure out how this book was going to take shape, I was so surprised to see that there were so many people with lived experience of self-injury who were writing books about their experiences. So there's so many memoirs out there about this, and those memoirs became the foundation for this book. So reading what others had written and then bringing those together through a theological lens.
And I'm curious, in those years, in those years that you were moving through this and working with this, I mean, the title is so powerful, Soul Care for Self-Injury. Can you tell us a little bit about how that title came to you, what the word soul care, what that phrase, how you started working with that as you were kind of moving through self-injury, and why you chose that language?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think a lot of the times when self-injury is talked about, it's talked about through a medical model lens, where often the focus is on stopping the cutting itself, stopping the self-injuring behavior. And so what I found when I was reading some of the memoirs and thinking about this more deeply is that a more holistic view of self-injury, why it might be happening, or ways that people who self-injure could move towards healing, like the spiritual aspect of that was missing. And what I found when I started digging into the memoirs was a lot of the memoirists talked about their spirituality. A lot of them talked about God, which was surprising to me. And so I wondered, could practical theology, was there a way for practical theology to sort of like fill this gap of the spiritual part of this phenomenon needing to be talked about and recognized more?
Mm-hmm. And it's just so, I mean, it's so integrative as you're sharing that. Your lens is so integrative and also so survivor-centered and so important. Um, I'm also wondering how how do you see this book kind of fitting into broader conversations about mental health, disability, spirituality? This is part of what all of your work and MAD theology and also working with MAD and disabled folks. How does this book kind of open these conversations for us in broader ways?
Yeah, so when I was doing my THM, actually, I came across like the website Mad in America, which I was like, what is this? So I started digging in. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and found that Mad Studies existed, and I had some knowledge of critical disability studies before that time, but Mad Studies existed, Crip studies, and so this project, my dissertation, and this book was a way for me to sort of bring some of those important lenses and into practical theology. And I know other folks are doing this work too, in practical theology, and I'm so excited to see this conversation continue to blossom. And so, yeah, this book is definitely infused with MAD studies and also the methodology that we used, and hopefully the deep listening that I used, I think is a way of doing the MAD studies work, doing the disability studies work and highlighting the voices of the memoirists. That was what was most important to me, listening to hear what they had to say about what was going on and what needs to be done for healing work.
Yeah, that really just maybe expanding off of that, because that phrase is so important, deep listening, right? And that itself can be a paradigm change in some of the ways that work happens and healing happens and faith, you know. I'm just wondering if you can you just expand a little bit upon that, on the deep listening and how that was a methodology for you and how that opened this kind of broader conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Like, so when I was sort of like doing research around that, I would like complement the memoirist books, what I was finding was a lot of people in faith communities were feeling really shut out when they were talking about, if they revealed to others in their faith communities that they struggled with self-harm. A lot of people were found that they were silenced. Faith leaders would often react with disgust or fear. There were stories of people being removed from leadership positions or not allowed to work with young people anymore because they were um, self-injuring. And there wasn't, like I said at the beginning, like there's not a lot of stuff out there to read. So if you're looking for something that really like talks about like where God is in all of this, or yeah, ways to feel not like there's not so much shame or stigma around what's happening, it's hard to find. And so yeah, like, sorry, Iris, what was the question? I just sort of lost my train of thought there.
You're just in it. That's because you're in
Yeah,
it.
sorry, I'm very in it.
Just about how deep listening opened you up to that, about receiving all
Oh,
those
yeah,
stories.
sorry, right. Okay. So I was gonna say, in some ways I was hoping that this book and this methodology could be a bit of an antidote to that, to the people finding that there wasn't space for these experiences. And like I said, in the book, I do focus on some memoirist stories where there was openness, there was um uh there was deep listening, there was like models of how self-injury can be, like when it's discovered, there's compassion, there's love. So it wasn't all bad. I was actually very I felt so hopeful reading these stories that some faith leaders knew what to do. They knew how to hold people and walk with them in such loving ways. So it is out there. Unfortunately, I found it quite imbalanced, that a lot of times people talked about their hurt and pain. And so yeah, I hope this book will help to sort of maybe bridge that, or like I said, offer some like a healing balm to those folks who felt like they haven't been loved.
Mhm. Thanks, Amy. And I mean, I think that love and that compassion just flows off of the pages of your book. It really does. And, you know, maybe that leads us into another question, which is, you kind of touched on this, but maybe you could go into it a little more. What do you wish more people understood about self-injury, particularly in faith and mental health spaces?
Yeah, I mean, probably the main thing that I use, because when people find out that I do research on self-injury, often the story would start, which is like, my daughter self-injures, or my friend does, or I do. And so often I found that there is this real desire to tell stories to somebody who could sit with it and just hear what's going on. Most of the time, people will tell me that they've found a really good therapist that they're working with, and things are getting better. Once in a while, I hear from people, they would say like the wait for mental health support, especially folks who I met in Europe, were telling me that the wait for mental health support for some of the young people they were working with who were self-injuring was like so long, like up to like a year. So they're wondering like what can they do in the interim to help people. Um sorry again, Iris, what was the main? I'm having like cognitive overload.
That's because it's been a day because we got a snowstorm.
It's true.
No, it was about that though. And you were kind of getting into it more, I think, with deep listening again coming up. Like, what do you just wish that people understood
Oh,
about
right.
injury in mental health and faith spaces, particularly?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I just want to briefly say is that it's happening. A lot of people are struggling with it, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic. A lot of research came out where people were saying it was getting more self-injury was happening amongst young people during the pandemic. And one thing that is important to know about self-injury is often once somebody starts, it's really hard to stop. It can be very addictive because it's a way to cope with really hard stuff that's going on in people's lives. And so if there's not an alternative coping mechanism that's discovered, often if self-injury works, it's what people will do. And so, yeah, it's definitely happening. Another thing that I really find when I talk about self-injury to people is people will always ask me, well, Amy, if somebody is self-injuring, does that mean that they're suicidal? That's the question I always get. And like even in I'm doing an abnormal psychology course right now for my coursework for becoming a psychotherapist, and self-injury is in the suicide chapter, which I think is interesting. So I wouldn't have put it there. I would have put, I think of self-injury more like the way Carl Menninger thought about it, which is that self-injury is actually anti-suicide. Self-injury is a person's way of coping so that they can continue to live. They want to live, they want to get through it, and this is the way that they're trying to make that happen. So if you go away with one thing from today, that's what I hope that you'll remember, that it's people, they really want to live, they want to figure out how to get through the tough stuff.
That's so important, right? And I think just you sharing this and having written this book and this project, like I can just hear the paradigm of breaking stigma, like in what you're sharing with us, and then how that also goes into hopefully on a cultural level, reducing shame, right? Because you're so drawing attention to that survival mechanism that is in place and how that can get covered over by the stigma, and the importance of deep listening to open all the layers up because it's so complex. And, in that respect, like, I think it's so just listening to you speak, and also when one reads the book, it feels deeply personal. Can you speak a little bit to how your own experiences shape your writing in this project and in the process?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I've struggled with self-injury myself when I was younger. And so this is a way for me to think it through theologically. I really wanted to know that that this kind of tough stuff, that God can handle it, that theology can handle it, that the church, that spirituality can handle it. And I think coming out the other side of this, I think the answer is yes. That there's theology that's rich enough and deep enough for these kind of to hold these kind of experiences, and to respond in life-giving ways to these kinds of experiences. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for letting us witness the pioneer and visionary in this incredible work that you do. Again, I'm so struck just by the survivor-centered praxis that you're bringing into the work, in centering voices, in rejecting some paradigms that might increase shame or perpetuate shame. So it's just, I mean, as someone that's dedicated to survivor-centered in everything I do, it's just so heartening to hear. And I love hearing you say the answer is yes. Yes, theology can do this. Yes, God is here. And how do we listen and understand? It's just, it's very, very moving. And what about, I mean, this is such a deeply personal topic, the work, the process, the years. Do you want to share how writing this book has changed you in any way?
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about this yesterday while I was driving. Driving seems to bring clarity for me. Um, I would say to anyone here who's listening, who's thinking about writing a book, write it. Because the world needs good books. Growing up, I was always an introvert. I still am. And I found I always went to books to for healing, for learning, for all the good stuff that books can bring. So I still believe in books. I still believe that I can think of a handful of books that really changed my life. And so, yeah, if there's something in you that you need to get out in the world, I really encourage you to try. Um, yeah, and the other thing too that I found is the process of writing and publishing as well has really been such a beautiful communal act for me. Being welcomed into Emmanuel and being able to study and learn at Emmanuel, and also then here also working at Emmanuel, and even having today with the book launch. Like, it's just been such a beautiful thing to be welcomed into the space and to be held here by others who've sort of walked this path before me of studying and writing and teaching. So I'm so grateful for the community that has been around this book, and also around Matt and Crip Theology Press, which has kind of been born out of these questions of how can we listen deeply to people who are who are struggling, who are trying to find a way forward, who live with disabilities, and so on. So yeah, I have nothing but gratitude today, and love for everyone who's here. So thank you, everyone.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that we got that love and gratitude for you, Amy. And you kind of preempted my next question, which is, I'm going a little radical off of the sheet of questions that I have prepared. But I mean, as you were talking about how writing this book has changed you and being in community, there is this incredible press, Matt and Crip Theology Press, and I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about why it came into being, how, you know, academia is an incredible place and publishing is a thing, and it is wrapped up in commercial media industries that are rooted in patriarchy and colonialism and a lot of complicated structures of power. And we can look at the way that those structures of power come into healing and paradigms and sharing story. And, I think it's so your advice about, if you want to write a book, write it. We need the stories. And so we also need places for those stories to come into being. So can you just share a little bit about Matt and Crip Theology Press?
Yeah, for sure. Well, some people who are here were a part of my journey of sort of coming into publishing over the past decade-ish kind of thing. So I've worked in different academic spaces at different journals, and I found yeah, it was amazing experience, and it's made me who I am today. Somebody who's able to say, let's start a press, let's try these things. There's also some complicated parts of publishing as well. Often, you know, it can kind of feel like this is the way we've always done it, so we'll just keep doing it this way forever. And so I wondered if there was ways that others could come into the conversation who may not normally be invited. You know, it takes a lot of energy, time, capacity to write a book. You know, so not everybody does that. Not everybody has the time or the desire. So are there ways for others to come into the conversation who might be writing poetry, doing art, writing short stories? So that's why the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health and Disability came around. That was a space for folks to be able to submit their work. And I hope that we've been able to expand the conversation a little bit more. Sort of like, I feel like the edges of like sort of like the regular academic folks, or like pieces that would normally be put into a journal, the edges are starting to bleed out a little bit more. So over the years, where more and more people are coming into the conversation, which has been so beautiful. And then over the years, as I was meeting people at the journal, people would say to me, oh, I'm thinking of writing a book, or I could see there was a book in them. And so the press was born out of that wondering of, could more voices come into this conversation, especially in theology, as I think it's really needed. And it's lovely to be able to, to create a space where some of these books can be born, and to support authors through the process of dreaming a book, and then actually being able to hold it in their hands. It's been a beautiful thing.
Thank you for doing this work, Amy. Especially as you were saying that, and I was seeing this beautiful heart and gaze in you, like your mad theologian gaze that can see the book in people that others might not always see the book, but I feel like you can see the book, and then you have such the structures of support and are building and also leading community yourself. So maybe, because I have literally 1 minute left in my chatting with you, if folks want to support the work you're doing, whether through the purchasing your book, through the press, other projects, how can we support you?
Yeah, well, definitely like pop on our website and see if there's any books that are of interest to you. That's one way. The press is also taking patrons now. So if you're interested in sort of helping us keep the lights on, that's one way you could become a patron. And also like get into the conversation. If you write, come write for us. Be a part of get into the mess with us. That's really what I'm trying to say. Get into the mess and come be a part of what we're doing. Because we have some lovely books that might be good for your faith community. Especially, I'm just thinking of Alan Jorgensen, who I can see is here. Alan's book for about that's for parents with disabilities who are part of faith communities. So that's something that your faith community could use. It's structured as like an 8-week guide to read stories of folks, and then respond within your community. We have Iris's book as well, which is a beautiful book that's called The Poetry of Belonging. So that's another one you could pick up. And then there's my book, and there's another anthology that we're looking for as well, for some content for that. So please join us, join us in the work.
I can attest that getting into the beautiful mess with Amy has been one of the greatest experiences of my life, folks. I highly recommend it. Amy, thank you so, so much for just really honestly just being you, because I feel like this beautiful book just has emerged out of you being you, and for sharing yourself with us through your work and your passion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iris. So I think we're going to move to a time of Q&A now. So we'll do that. We can open up the space now. If anybody has a question about the book, I would love to answer. Clara.
Hi, Dr. Amy.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
We're here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the wonderful presentation and the works that you're doing. It's amazing. So I have two questions for you. How do you hope this book impacts readers? And what practical strategies do you recommend for those that are offering care?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so for the first one, I really hope that this book's not easy to read. It's really not. There's a lot of sad stuff in it, but there's also really good stuff in it too. So I hope you'll take the time to move through it at the pace that feels right for you. As I was doing the research, it took me a long time because there's a lot of pain in this book, but there's also a lot of beauty. So so I would say move through it at the pace that feels right for you. So there's two parts to this book actually. The first part's my dissertation, and then the second part is practical stuff that spiritual care providers and psychospiritual therapists can use when working with folks who self-injure. And some of the resources also I think will be good for some self-exploration as well. If self-injury is a part of your history or something that you're navigating right now, there's some stuff there that might be interesting to you to check out too. So I hope that the book will be both interesting from like the research side, and then the second side gets into the nitty gritty of like, so what do we do about this? And here's some things that you can try to use in your practice or in your leadership roles, wherever you find yourself. I hope that helps. Steve, hello.
Amy, hello.
So lovely
Can-
to see you.
Well, nice to be here in quotation marks. First of all, congratulations. I think I sort of caught you in midstream in your decade of mulling and thinking and all of that, and in our work with the International Journal of Practical Theology, of course. Question I have for you, and I guess this comes from the point of view of a pastor, who may have someone in his or her congregation who is experiencing this, either themselves personally or as a family member is going through it. And wondering, we've talked for a long time about practicing a ministry of presence, empathy, being with the person, which of course is essential in this. But I'm wondering, just from a theological framework kind of point of view, do you have any words to say how this gets framed theologically? And I know that's a major part of your work, but just maybe a short form of that. I'm sure it's different for every person, but do you have some general thoughts on that, especially for a working pastor who may be encountering this and may actually want to address it from the pulpit?
Oh boy, that's a big one, Steve. Yeah, I would say sort of in a nutshell that self-injury is not something that is self-injury has been quite intertwined with Christianity from the beginning. This is one of the things that that the book talks about. So I think there's a lot of points in the Christian story where self-injury and people meet. And so that's how the book unfolds. We wander through these different points of time where self-injury is happening in the lives of Christians. And so I think that your friend would find there's a lot of good stuff in this book that they could pull from, just to even like normalize the fact that this has been happening for a very long time. And so it might help to reduce some stigma and also reduce some of the shame that folks feel or a need to hide, because it's been happening for a very long time. And others have written better books than me about that, but hopefully this book will give you some points where you can sort of latch on and find and keep going with your reading about self-injury. So
Thank you.
I hope that helps, Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Anna Maria,
Yeah. Hello.
hello.
Makes me so happy to read about this because this is one of the things that I've been wanting to do in my own path. So I'm so glad. I have a question. I mean, specifically talking about like the type of work that I would like to do. I would like to know if you have like background in psychology, and if not, how kind of like how do you approach like having all these conversations that have like a lot of like very specific and professional like psychological kind of like um I don't know, like framework, and how like you manage to connect it to your own experience and to theology. I am super interested in that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I don't have a background in psychology per se, but I do have a background in practical theology or pastoral theology. So that was the lens that I used for this book. Right now, I am studying to become a psychotherapist. So I do like kind of these things kind of merged in the book. And I also, like was said at the beginning, I also teach in a program for students who are becoming psychospiritual therapists as well. So it's kind of all part of a larger conversation. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
No, I was wondering how like you managed to, to kind of like make the connections between the different disciplines.
Hmm.
Um, I think is just like it's almost like creating something kind of new. I feel like it. So I don't know how was your process? Kind of
Mhm.
like, you know.
Yeah, well, I was really lucky to have a really awesome PhD committee, like dissertation committee, who were on my side with trying out some new things with this project, I think. And so our methodology and also the heart of this book, I think, was listening. Um, yeah, and I think sort of intertwining some of the mad studies ways of being and ways of doing really helped this project. So I think, I mean, I remember during my dissertation defense, some of the folks who were there examining me said they found this project to be very creative in the ways that we were able to sort of um, incorporate methodological ways of going through going through the books, and also sort of like the research that went around it. So yeah, I mean, I hope that helps. I I think there are creative ways to go about this work, um, even within sort of like the I don't want to say rigidity, but some of the confines that dissertation work sort of offers you. You can find ways to be yourself moving through it, I think, and find ways to do it creatively too. So there's hope.
Thank you. No, this is great. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely clarified my questions.
Okay, good.
Thank
Good.
you.
Maybe there's time for one last question. All right, well, if there's nothing percolating, then.
I've got a question for you, Amy.
Oh, yes, please.
It's Heather.
Oh, Heather, hello.
I just can't find my hand up button right now.
Oh, good.
My question is, what do you think, what do you wish you had known when you started writing your dissertation about the process of writing and publishing eventually, that you think, like, I wish I could go back and give that to however many years ago, Amy?
What a good question, Heather. I would probably say to myself, it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to take breaks and take naps and just kind of do it at a snail's pace, which is what I did. So for me, my sort of I get really bad migraines. I have chronic pain, and so I'm not always as fast as everybody else, but I am as determined, as Iris had said before. So I would say, Heather, just do it at your own pace and be yourself. The other thing I would tell myself is don't give up. So when you're writing something huge, there can be a lot of days where it feels like you just kind of want to burn it. And I think that's normal for folks who are writing. Part of the process of writing, I think, is coming back to it every day, even when you're not, even when you're stuck, when other people seem to be moving more quickly than you, when other people seem to be figuring it out more quickly than you. Don't give up. Just keep coming back to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for those questions. I feel like my brain has been thoroughly picked. So I think we're going to move now to Jenny, who's going to do some closing remarks for us.
Can I just say a little something before? I don't have a question, but I just want to
Yes.
say
Hello.
it's such a joy to celebrate this today, Amy, and so happy that to see this, as I wrote in the comments, this burst through all of this amazing creativity that you brought to this project all the way through. And so I am grateful to have been able to, as I said here, just be a part of this in such an up close kind of way. And it's such this kind of privilege to be able to celebrate. I wish we could have shared this with your previous self. This is one thing.
Yes.
You'll be able to tell the story in an event like this.
Oh my goodness, that's so true.
So what a joy. And I just wanted to express that publicly, how amazing it is and what a wonderful resource and book it is for so many teachers, for practitioners, for people in congregations and leaders and spiritual leaders. So yeah, so congratulations.
Thank you, Pam.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Pam. That was so well said and really speaks to just the joy of this occasion and just the amazing accomplishment of Dr. Amy Panton. And I loved what you were saying at the end with your question about, just keep plugging away, just keep at it. And just when you feel, I remember having those feelings when I wrote my dissertation and just felt like I was behind everybody else and wasn't picking up on things. And I kept coming back to the document every day. And so that's such great advice for people working on big projects. So I'll introduce myself this time. I didn't last time because I was so excited. I forgot to say who I was. I'm Dr. Jenny Bright. I'm the Wu Tai Shan Venerable Dai Professor of Buddhist Spiritual Care. And I have the real great honor and privilege and pleasure of working with Amy in a lot of different capacities. Mostly we teach together, so we get to teach the capstone course together. And it's I have to say that, Amy, you are such an innovative and creative thinker. Really, you are a pioneer and a visionary in so many ways. And so I think that the students really benefit from just the care that you put into your teaching, into your writing, and all the things you do, which I really think comes to fruition in this book. And so I'm just so grateful to get to work with you. And I really appreciate how you enter into, self-harm and other really difficult topics, and you do so with such wisdom and with tact and with care. And I also appreciate how in this work that you really bring the issue of self-injury, of self-harm, of self-injury, and you talk about it's such a difficult topic for so many of us, involving shame, stigma, guilt, all of these things. And it's so deeply personal and often not spoken about. It's often kept quiet. And I really appreciated how you spoke about self-injury is anti-suicide, and that people want to live, and that I really deeply appreciate how you see people as resilient beings. So I just want to share briefly a bit of the Buddhist perspective of this, just to sort of add to our theological or dharmological conversation. As some of you may know, or many of you might know, that the Buddha, before the Buddha was the awakened one, for 7 years, he actually engaged in self-harm sorts of behaviors as well. So he would starve himself, injure himself, really put his body through not sleeping, not eating, and all of these. And he did this for about 7 years until he was nearly dead. And it was a kind woman came along and offered him some milk and some sort of rice pudding, and that nourished him. That care nourished him. And this is actually, many of you have heard of in Buddhism and all schools of Buddhism, that the middle way is a central sort of theology for us. And that middle way is between these two extremes. And one of those extremes is on that side is on self-injury or self-harm. So one thing I really appreciate about this book is that it really also, I think, invites other spiritual and religious traditions to think theologically, or in my case, dharmalogically, about self-harm and how we can support and make space for in our faith communities to support people who are experiencing this, who are survivors of this, or in the middle of this, how we can really open our hearts and our wisdom up to them. So I'm very inspired to think about your work in a Buddhist context, and I think that is something that I would definitely like to write about. So thank you for that. Very much. Thank you for that inspiration. And I do want to just note as well that you really approach your work with a survivor-centered outlook, and that I really appreciate how you really pay attention to people's stories, that you really listen deeply to stories. And I love this approach of thinking of this work in people's lives and their stories, and with such love and the care that you bring. And I also just want to point to how, what I also really love about your book is that it's very well researched, and, it's great scholarship, but it also has really practical implications, and that it really speaks to people, for people who are therapists or spiritual care, or people themselves who are experiencing these experiencing self-harm or have this in their history. I really appreciate that you really give space and make, allow people to have a voice. And so I just really appreciate the way that you take from this. And lastly, I have just a bit of time left. I just really most of all want to acknowledge and recognize and appreciate the vulnerability and the courage you have in writing this book, and also because this is also part of your story. And as someone who also has self-harm as part of my history, it is incredibly affirming and life-giving, and just it's such a part of that pathway to healing to have such a beautifully written and loving and caring book written about this topic. And so I just really want to thank you for that so much. And so I'll congratulate you again for writing this marvelous book. We at Emmanuel College are so grateful for you as a colleague and friend, and you are a pioneer and visionary, the mad theologian of Emmanuel College, and we're just so grateful for you and what you do. So congratulations again.
So now I guess we could pretend that we're going to eat empanadas and have coffee or whatever and chat, but it's been a real pleasure to share this time together virtually, and I thank you all for joining us and for your flexibility and change of plans. Was there anybody else who was supposed to say goodbye, or did I jump in? I'm good. That was the closing. That was the end. We're good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you,
Thanks, Amy.
everyone. So lovely to see you.
Have a great night.
I have a question. Was there going to be any way of purchasing these books at Emmanuel in person if we wanted to?
Yes, we are working on that.
Amazing.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
I'll follow up with Andrew about that.
Great. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.